Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
2 days before Article 50 is finally triggered, Newsnight's been given an exclusive insight into how the negotiations with the EU will be conducted by the former head of the diplomatic service. Sir Simon Fraser, who had key posts in both the European Commission and in the Foreign Office, has told this programme that EU member countries have so far been disciplined, prevented from making any meaningful pre-negotiations with the UK. He also confirmed it would not be possible to agree all of the issues during the 2-year negotiation period, and he foresaw the distinct possibility of political and economic turbulence. Well, we'll hear his interview with our diplomatic editor, Mark Urban, in full in a moment. But first, to our political editor, Nick Watt, who is here. What are you hearing tonight, Nick?
Well, SNP sources are suggesting that Theresa May gave Nicola Sturgeon the clear impression today that the UK is confident that it will be able to negotiate the outlines of an overall deal within 18 months. So that means the exit deal, and on top of that, it means the future trading relationship. Now, Number 10 doesn't believe that the future trading relationship can be done and dusted then. It will need what is described as an implementation phase. But what this shows is, for the first element, the exit deal, the UK is accepting the timetable of the EU, which is agree it by the autumn of 2018 so that it can be fully ratified by the end of that 2-year deadline. But Michel Barnier, the EU's chief negotiator, is saying if you want to have that trade deal done at the same time, even in that sort of a transitional outline, you've got to get over 2 big hurdles. Agree the exit payment, and secondly, agree the status of EU nationals.
And what word is there on those exit payments?
Well, interestingly, David Davis, on Question Time tonight, he said that the UK will not pay anything like the 60 billion euros that is being mentioned in Brussels. But he did say, he's obviously listening to Michel Barnier, that the UK will meet its international obligations. That's a big thing that Barnier has been saying. What that means is that the UK will be obliged to abide by its EU budget commitments that have been agreed by all member states up to 2020. That basically means around a third of the budget. But David Davis tonight also cited a recent House of Lords report, and this said if the UK leaves the EU without a deal, it will not, by law, have to pay a penny. He regards that as a great card to have in his back pocket.
Good stuff, Nick. Thanks very much. Our diplomatic editor, Mark Urban, has been speaking to Sir Simon Fraser, who until 2015 was the Foreign Office's top civil servant. He began by asking him how successful European leaders have been in holding the EU's 27 member states to the same negotiating position.
Well, I think there's been a lot of discipline, actually. It came out of the Commission, first of all, but since then there's been a very disciplined position across the EU, and I don't think that there has been a lot of informal, behind-the-scenes discussion of the agenda or of the key issues yet. That will happen once we've formally triggered and the 2-year process begins.
How likely is it that we'll get towards the end of that 18-month period that the EU has set for reaching initial agreement with things unresolved on some key issues?
Well, I think personally it's certain that we won't have resolved everything in the period before the expiry of the Article 50 process. As we know, the EU side want to start with negotiating the terms of the separation. That's about money, it's about the rights of people living in other countries in Europe. It's probably also about the borders, for example, in Ireland. And the British side, on top of that, wants to move rapidly to discuss the future relationship, both political and economic, between Britain and the EU. And that is a very complex second set of negotiations. There's no way, in my view, that we're going to complete all that in 2 years, which is why we are going to have to think about transitional mechanisms or what the British side calls progressive implementation of new arrangements.
You've mentioned unity. So will the UK, do you think, in that period be trying to talk to the Poles or the Czechs or whoever in order to maybe offer them money for infrastructure or things that, you know, make deals with them on a bilateral basis, or try to change their attitude in the wider discussion? Can that work, or will the unity of the 27 remain strong, do you think?
Well, I think they will try to maintain that unity, but what you describe is diplomacy. I mean, the British will, of course, talk to the different member states in the EU and try to understand their position and work on those positions and try to find ways of reaching agreement and possibly, catering for the interests of some member states. That's normal. But in the end, the UK has got to negotiate with the EU as a whole through the EU's appointed negotiator, which will be essentially led by the Commission. And I think it would be a mistake to try divide and rule because I don't think that will work.
What are the chances of the UK ending up coming towards the end of the Article 50 period without agreement on many areas, as you've predicted, and there being economic turbulence, political turbulence, a very difficult end to this process?
What I don't think it's possible to do in that time is to go through the whole negotiation for the future relationship. So there is a risk, nevertheless, that this breaks down or that we get to an unsatisfactory outcome, and there is political ill will and turbulence, both political and economic. I think it's in the interest of both sides to try to avoid that, and if we have unfinished business, to find agreement on a mechanism, a smooth mechanism for moving forward through transition so that the unfinished stuff can continue to be negotiated thereafter, but economic relations and political relationship can continue.
Simon Fraser speaking to Mark Urban.
I've been getting